Morning, everybody. Nice to see you guys. Hopefully nobody blew off any fingers or limbs or anything yesterday with the amount of fireworks and things that I heard going on. It's awesome. It's good to have you. Happy holiday weekend. Today, we're going to wrap up this series on Proverbs. We've been looking at Proverbs chapter 10. I got to pick the proverb that I would teach out of for this. I want to tell you that because you may or may not love this particular proverb. I want to tell you that I picked this proverb because this is a kind of wisdom I historically have not had very much of. Like, this is one of those moments where for me, I was like, I kind of want to wrestle with this week and then talk with you all about this because it's something I would love to also grow in. And so that's what it is. That's why I picked it. So let's talk about it. It's Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19. So it's our one verse for the whole morning. We'll work our way through it. It says this: when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. As somebody who speaks for a living, right? Like, who actually talks and always has this idea in my head that, like, you know, I bet you we could solve this just by having more and more conversations and more things about it. This has not always been the thing that I've been the best at. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. It's not a proverb that's about having the kind of wisdom to know what to say in the moment that you need to say it. It's the exact opposite, isn't it? It's about having the kind of wisdom of having when you have something to say and yet knowing when not to say it, actually. This is the difficult piece here. Let me illustrate it. I have a really good friend who now lives out of state, lives in Colorado, but we first met each other. He was my first roommate here in Tucson. I think it was like my freshman year of college. We lived together in this house and had a great time. We would talk about life, talk about all kinds of things. I noticed, though, and I've noticed this through most of my life, it seems like guys, and I know this may not be universally true, but I've noticed this for me. Oftentimes, if I were just to walk up to any one of you guys as a guy and be like, hey, let's get together and we should just talk, you'd be like, what's going on? What is that? But if I was like, let's go for coffee, let's get some food, like, let's go do a thing, oftentimes what ends up happening is through doing a thing, eating something, whatever, we talk and we start engaging and it's just more natural and easy. And so that's why the ping pong table that existed in the center of our living room was an absolute gift. And we didn't have any money. We were both bachelors living in a house. And so the only furniture really needed was this giant ping pong table in the middle of the living room. And we would just volley back and forth all the time. Like, he'd be home, I'd be home. And the next thing you know, you just pick up a ping pong paddle and start playing. And half the time we weren't even keeping score. And what I recognized is it became an excuse to talk. We would just, how are things? What's going on? What have you been thinking about? What's going on here? And we just connect and talk. During this time, though, I started to get really annoyed with him. And I don't know if you remember this era. There was an era in time where guys, for some reason, the way you would say hello is you'd be like, hey, what's going on? And then you'd softly punch somebody in the shoulder. Do you remember this? Was this not a thing for you? It was for me and many of my friends around me. You're supposed to softly do this. Well, my roommate didn't understand the word softly. He didn't know how to spell it or something. Like, it just wasn't there. And so he would go and be like, hey, how's it going? And he'd punch you in the shoulder and haul off and really hit you. And the first time you're kind of confused by that. You're like, well, I guess that's what he does. And then after a while, I started to get like this pretty big bruise on my shoulder because we live together, see each other all the time. I don't know if you've been punched repeatedly in a bruise before. You don't get happier. Like, you don't get more and more kind because of that. You start to get angry. I started to imagine, like, I'm going to hit him back, but not his shoulder. You know, like that type of moment. You start to get pretty frustrated. And so one night we're playing ping pong, and I just served the ball to him. I actually brought a ping pong paddle. I took it from the youth ministry, so you'll get it back, I promise. But we're playing ping pong, and I hit the ball to him, and I'm just like, hey, man, I don't know if you noticed, but like when you punch to say hi, you keep punching me in the shoulder. And I hit the ball to him. And then he said, I'm just saying hi. Lots of people do that. What's the big deal? You do it too. And he hits it back to me. And then I said, well, sure, but you aren't just saying hello. You hit pretty hard. And he goes, I do not. Yes, you do. I do not. Yes, you do. Right? And he goes, well, then why hasn't anyone ever said this before? Hits it back. And I said, because nobody else has to live with you every day. And I hit it back. And he said, well, then it sounds like it's just a you problem. And then he hits it back. And I said, well, this me problem is sitting here talking to you, telling you that I don't like that. And I hit it back. And then he looks and he says, well, maybe you should just get tougher. And he hits it back to me. We're starting to hit the ball a little harder, right? The ping pong paddle is moving a little bit quicker. And I said, well, maybe you should stop trying to prove that you're some kind of a man. And I hit the ball back to him. I know it's starting to get worse, right? And then he said, well, at least I'm not the one crying about it. And he hits it back. And I said, well, that's because you're apparently too dumb to understand what's actually happening. And I hit it back. And then he looks at me and he goes, so apparently now I hit too hard and I'm dumb. And he hits it back. And then I said, yeah, apparently I moved in with some kind of Neanderthal that can't understand basic English. And I hit it back to him. And then he says, it looks okay, so this is what we're going to do. And I hit the ball and it hit him square in the forehead. I hit as hard as I could. And then he immediately reaches down and he grabs the ball out of the basket at the ping pong table and he hits it back at me and hits me. And then I raise my paddle and he raises his paddle, and this is so dumb. Both of us are standing like we're going to get in a paddle fight, you guys. Do you know how dumb that is? This is the dumbest thing. If you had been looking through the window, you'd be like, what is going on in there? And I recognize at any point in time, that really dumb conversation, because it was just a really, really ridiculous conversation. There are all kinds of things. We could look at this, analyze it, and be like, we shouldn't have said this, shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have started by accusing, like all kinds of ways to break that down. But you know the basic principle that was happening in there that both of us were living out of is both of us were essentially going, you know what? If you're going to say that, I'm going to say this. If you're going to say that, I'm going to say this. We weren't just volleying a ping pong ball. We were literally volleying our words back and forth with greater ferocity and intensity. And all that was happening throughout the course of that, it was actually just getting colder and meaner and more defensive. Do you know the irony of this? The irony of this, and it's not lost on me at all, is that I went to talk to him about how, you know what, man, I don't really like it when this happens because you're hurting me. That's the basic thing. I don't want to talk to you about the fact that you're hurting me. And the irony is that through the course of adding words and words and words and words and words and volley back and forth, I actually end up saying all kinds of things that are actually hurting him and being rude and doing all this stuff to him. I became the very thing that I was addressing through that moment. It just started to happen in me. Now, I want to read Proverbs 10:19 in light of this story one more time. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. I want to ask you a question. Don't raise your hand for any of these. How many of you have ever had a moment in your marriage, or maybe in a dating or romantic relationship, and you found yourself in the situation where the other person said something or they did something that you didn't like or didn't agree with, and all of a sudden you're like, I can play ping pong. And you started to engage. And then they hit it back. And each time it starts to be a little more intense and it starts to get a little worse. And suddenly you find yourself saying things you never wanted to say, doing things that you never really thought you would do. And it's actually just getting worse and worse. Like whatever issue you started with, now there's like a sea of issues to deal with because of all the things that were said that are now on the table. It's hard, isn't it? Or have you ever had this moment? I feel this so acutely. Parents with kids with parents, and somebody brings up something small and you're like, oh, it's fine, it's just a ping pong ball. And then they hit it back, but they say something and it hurts you or makes you frustrated or seems disrespectful or something happens. And then you hit it back a little bit harder, and the next thing you know, both of you are bringing up everything the other one's ever done or not done and all of the other stuff, and it's like all there, and you're starting to be, there's disrespect and there's frustration and name calling, and it just amplifies and gets out of control. Have you ever had that moment where you walk away as a parent going like, I kind of lost myself right there. I don't really like who I became at the end of that conversation because you got pretty mad? It can happen, can't it? Or my personal favorite, you scroll on social media and you see somebody post something and you go, they are not allowed to say that. They should not believe that. They should not be doing that, or whatever it is. And you're like, and someone, that person is me, needs to say something about this. And so let's play ping pong, right? And you start volleying words back and forth. And then the next thing you know, you're like 21 paragraph comments deep, and you're having to change all of your social media friends and followers because you're so frustrated at how this has turned out and it's been hurtful and people aren't talking or communicating anymore. Or maybe you're even at a Thanksgiving dinner or a 4th of July barbecue with friends or family, and that one friend or that one family member says that one thing, and now you're playing ping pong. And you walk away from those moments going, I don't like how this just kept going like this. And in the end, there's hurt and it's broken and there's relationships that get fractured, and you may not even like who you are when all of this is done. It's hard, isn't it? Right? This happens to the best of us. Even for a person who's pretty shy or reserved or quiet, live life long enough and you'll find yourself in a moment where this happens to you too. There comes a moment in our lives where we find ourselves thinking, the answer to this moment with this other person is more of my words. We don't think that way, but that's the way we play this out. It's like they just need to know, I just need to say, this just needs to be asserted, this just needs to be happen. We think that that is the actual answer, where the truth of the matter is there's often these moments where the wisest thing that we could do is to do what the writer of Proverbs is telling us, and it's actually learn the key moments of when it's necessary and wise to restrain our lips. And if you're like me with this passage, because again, I've not always been great at this, you might find yourself wanting to argue with this a little bit, because that's what I do. I look and I go, you know what though? Isn't there like an appropriate time where you should say the thing or you need to do the thing? Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely appropriate times to jump in or to say something or to have a difficult conversation or assert something. There's all kinds of appropriate times for that. And there are plenty of messages and literature and messaging and communication in the culture around us. We are not short on that encouragement at this point in time. Guys, I don't know if you've looked around. I don't think we have a cultural problem of we have too few people sharing their opinions right now. Like, I don't know that that's our greatest struggle in our culture and in our life. I actually think that there's plenty to learn and plenty to understand about that, and it's out there. What I think is rare is finding the wisdom of knowing when not to speak, finding the wisdom of knowing when more and more words aren't actually needed. And so that's what we're going to look at. Today we're going to look at Proverbs 10:19, just this one verse. And I want to highlight two moments as we do that we often face where more words don't actually equate to wisdom, where more words don't actually equate to better relationship or being helpful. So let's do that. First, I want to take a closer look at the passage. And I know it might seem like a really straightforward passage, but it's kind of an interesting little verse. You know it's an interesting little verse if you start reading through different modern English translations, because not a single one of them seems to want to translate it the same way. The ESV, the English Standard Version, is the one that I read earlier. I'll read it again. It should sound familiar now. Proverbs 10:19, it says this: when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The New Revised Standard Version also says something similar to this. But the New American Standard Bible says it this way: when there are many words, wrongdoing is unavoidable, but one who restrains his lips is wise. If you're reading from the New International Version, the NIV, which is probably the more common or popular version that a lot of people read from, it says, sin, now it's introducing that word, is not ended by the multiplying of words, but the prudent hold their tongues. I wanted to read all three because you guys see how if you read this, at first pass you could just look and be like, I think what this is saying is like quiet people are more wise. If you're an introvert or a really quiet person, this should, like, you're probably looking at the person next to you being like, this is my new life verse, right? Like, I found it. But that's actually not what it's trying to get at. This isn't about just being quiet. This isn't about being a person who doesn't have opinions or doesn't have things to say. It's not what's being wrestled with here. The reality is that what the ESV translates as transgression, what the New American Standard translates as wrongdoing, what the NIV translates as sin, all the same word. It's all just one word. And the best way to understand that word is to understand it defined this way. It's when an offense occurs or a crime occurs between two people. So this is not like this private, like, reflection moment that we're having here where it's just like, sometimes I just need to think about how many words and whether I'm creating these things or not. This is actually a dynamic between you and another person. So at minimum, this proverb would be applied between like two or more people who are in relationship or relating to one another somehow. But there's another word that I want to point out. And it makes this all the more clear. It's the Hebrew word chadal, right? Go ahead, you can look at your neighbor, stare him straight in the face and say this. Get the guttural part, chadal, right? And then apologize for spitting on them. This word, it can be defined as to cease or desist, right? To essentially like stop something that's occurring, right? You don't need to cease. Think of our own way of using this. You don't need to cease and desist something that's not happening already. To cease and desist implies that something's already going on. Something's already happening. So taking what we know here, let's think about this passage. And I want to paraphrase it the following way. This would be the way I might phrase or paraphrase this verse. I'd say this: when two or more people are communicating with one another, and there's already, because something needs to cease and desist, there's already a moment of frustration, transgression, if you want to use that word, hurt, harm, sin. Adding more words will not cause the hurt or the harm to go away. Instead, it will compound and end up creating more and more hurt and more harm. And that's what this passage is actually getting at. This is going to bring us to the first moment here today where I actually want to point to this. There's a situation where there's actually a wisdom in this life of holding one's tongue. And here it is. Here's the first one. When a conversation has escalated to the point of hurt, because it's already happened, and anger, more words won't make it better. When a conversation and you're in it and it's escalating and it's gotten to the point where there's already hurt in there and there's anger going and it just keeps escalating, more and more words are not simply going to be the answer. Like it doesn't just need more and more of I'm just going to add more and more things to this. Let me illustrate it. When I was growing up, my dad and I would get into a lot of arguments. For my dad as a parent, I think his most important thing was he wanted to be respected. And part of what respect looked like for him was when we make an agreement on something, and he's communicated that I would honor that. If he says something, I'm not always fighting him and arguing and trying to push back on all of the things, like that there's a respect there that happens, especially if it's something we've already decided on or agreed upon together. For me, when I was growing up, my most important thing was actually feeling seen and heard. And so what would happen is if I felt unseen and unheard, I'm like, I need to engage you about this. So I want you to imagine we live in a home where someone's like, but what I want is for you just to listen and to respect me. And I'm like, yeah, but you need to hear me and to see me. And so what happens is I start to argue and he's like, but respect. And then I start to argue and he says, but respect. And can you see this escalating a little bit? This is what it was. And we would find ourselves getting in a lot of arguments, a lot of tension. One of my chores was mowing the lawn. And my dad and I had agreed that I needed to have the lawn mowed on Saturday mornings. That was the basic agreement. And I said, okay, I hear you, I'll do that. Sure. And then there was one particular day, it was like 11:15 in the morning, and my dad comes and he looks and I'm just messing around the house. The lawn has not been mowed, nothing has occurred, and I might be watching TV or something like that at this particular point. And he looks at me and he goes, Ryan, you're gonna be grounded because you didn't mow the lawn. And I looked and I said, well, I'm gonna do it. And he said, we agreed that you would do it in the mornings. And I said, well, I don't know if you've noticed, but it is still the morning. There's an AM at the end of the numbers right now. And he was like, this is the afternoon. Like, this is lunchtime right now. And I was like, it's not the afternoon because the English word afternoon actually implies that it would be after noon. And noon is always defined by 12 p.m. And it is not after 12 p.m. So I still have 45 minutes before the morning ends in order to do this thing. And then he looks at me and he goes, that is not how most people understand more. And my dad and I are suddenly already arguing about the English language, the etymology of words, and literally the cultural definition and understanding of what constitutes mourning or not, going back and forth. It's exasperating, I know. And he looks and he finally just disappears for a moment and he comes back and he has created a contract in black and white writing that specifies the time, the place, the when, the how that I will do all of this. Like my dad ran a business, right? And so he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you're going to sign it and I need a witness so that we don't argue over these things. And I looked at him and I said, you're supposed to be my father. Stop treating me like an employee. And I say that to him and he says, I'm not treating you like an employee. If you were an employee, you'd be fired. You know what I mean? And he's so mad and frustrated. And I start to get disrespectful and he starts to say things and I start to say things. And finally he looks and he's like, you know what? You are grounded this is one day you're grounded for. And I looked at him and I said, why don't we just make it 2? Because I add words. And then he says, okay, then you're grounded for another day. Guys, it got to 90 days and 3 months before my dad was red in the face and just was like, I need to walk away from this situation right now. And he made his way into the room. By the way, this is the moment where if you've got a young person in your life that you're raising, you turn and you say, I'm so thankful for you because you could have had me, right? It's true. Like it was so incredibly frustrating. I share this with you, right? I share this with you because I think that there's this belief that we have where it's like, if I just say this, then he'll listen. And then I'm like, if I just say this, and if I just say this, and we start to escalate. Next thing you know, words get said that hurt one another. All of this just keeps ramping, and both of us keep trying to solve it the same way. More words, more context, more assertions. And it just starts to get absolutely out of control. Friends, when the conversation is escalating, and someone has already said something to hurt or attack the other person, you are not going to suddenly find the magic argument or comeback that makes them see your side. It's not how that works. When people are hurt or angry and things are escalating, they don't open up, they dig in and they defend. And this is where it talks about transgression is not lacking. And why I think the New American Standard says why transgression becomes unavoidable. It's this idea that it just starts to compound. People start to say things that they wouldn't have said otherwise. People start to do things they wouldn't have done. We just keep adding more. And it gets harder, and it gets harder. We're not just playing ping pong anymore, are we? So I want to challenge you with something. And I know this might sound kind of weird. It's an illustration using ping pong. Think back to my friend and I playing ping pong in the living room where we just keep hitting it harder, escalate, escalate, escalate. The challenge I have for you all is this, and it's catch the ball. I know that's weird, but hang out for just a moment. Catch the ball. Think in those moments when somebody said the thing that hurts you or angers you, and you're like, I'm just going to hit that ball back so hard. I'm just going to do this again and again and again. What I want you to do is when you feel that starting to move and starting to escalate, I actually want you just to think, what would happen if I just caught the ball right now? And here's what that means. You catch it. You don't hit it back. You don't volley. You don't say more words. You don't add. You stop for just a second. And I know this would be weird in front of another person, but I want you to imagine you're holding a ping pong ball and you look at it and you find yourself saying, is this what I really want? And here's what your answer to that question is going to be. Yeah, I want to hit it back really hard because you'll feel all of that, won't you? And then I want you to ask a second question, but is it what I really want? Is that what really matters to me? Right? They hit this back at me. They hit this like this. This is what this conversation is, but what is it that really matters? What do I really want? Is this going to be helpful? Is adding more words right now going to take me to the place that I want to go? Is this going to be good for my marriage? Is this going to be what ultimately takes me in the direction of being the kind of parent that I want to be? Is this really what I want? And in that moment, you get to make a critical decision. You don't have to hit the ball back. It takes two to play ping pong. Or maybe you hit it back differently than you would have. But I just want to challenge you. Just think of that phrase, think of that idea of catch the ball for just a moment. Bring just enough pause in there to look at it and decide what you want to say or what you don't. Here's the thing. Do you know how many marriage hurts and struggles would be mitigated if people paused in the midst of one issue that's already occurred to catch the ball before they add so many other ones on top of it? That's one of the hardest things. Anybody who's been in a romantic relationship, a long-term relationship, any of those things, you know, one of the hardest things isn't just the moment that it's occurred, it's all the things that get said, that get put on top of that. And now you're not dealing with one thing, you're dealing with all of this hurt and all of these moments, and how dare you? Right? That's a big deal. Do you know how many parenting moments would change? If on occasion, when we're like, okay, let's go full on ping pong, somebody caught the ball and actually looked and said, is this what I really want right now? Like in that story with my dad, I needed to be grounded, absolutely. Guys, I would have gone till it had been 2 years. I was seeing nothing but red. Like my house would have become Alcatraz. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like that's where that was headed. It wasn't going to end. At some point, my dad did a really good thing by just being like, I gotta walk away from this because this isn't taking him where he wants to go, and this isn't gonna be what ultimately is even good for me as this thing continues to escalate, right? It becomes a really big deal. And I want to say this, because there's probably somebody in the room as you're like, okay, so you're telling us to catch the ball, but you know what's going to happen? Somebody's going to catch the ball and they're going to be like, I don't want to talk about this, and just walk away. And that's going to become avoidance. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about avoidance. Here's why. When I'm talking about this idea of catching the ball, some form of hurt has already happened. This doesn't make that go away. You still have something to talk about. You still have something that's occurred between the two of you that you now need to deal with. You got to come back around and go, can we talk about that? Can we address this? Can we just have a moment to engage this again? You're not making that go away. What you're doing is you're going, and because that matters, I don't want to add this and this and this and say a bunch of other things that I wish I hadn't said on top of it. You're letting what matters most be what matters most. And if you have someone in your life that might be worried about but I'm just worried you're going to use this to avoid, here's what you can do. Just make a commitment to them. You know what? It is perfectly okay for you to say at any point in time, I feel like this is starting to escalate for me in a way that I don't like who I am right now, or I don't like where this is going, and I just need a moment, but I promise I'll come back in 2 hours. If you're one of those people that's like, I hate it when I don't like going to bed when we're mad at each other. Okay, cool, then I promise we'll talk about it tonight. If you need a little more time because you're one of those processor okay, then I promise I'll talk about it tomorrow morning. Or set the time or the place so that there's a continued moment of this so you don't just leave somebody hanging, but give yourself the opportunity to actually start to de-escalate so that you get your best self back and you don't end up playing full-fledged ping pong. Right. That brings us to the second and final point here this morning, and it's this. When someone else isn't curious, adding more words isn't going to change their mind. This one's hard, I promise you. It seems obvious, but it's also hard. So I'll say it again. When someone else isn't curious, adding more words isn't going to change their mind. We looked at the first half of this proverb earlier. I want to look at the second half quick. Proverbs 10:19. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. But whoever, keyword, restrains his lips is prudent. Again, you don't need to restrain your lips when you have nothing to say. You practice restraints when you have something already formulated and ready, already on the tip of your tongue that you want to say, but think it's probably wise not to, right? That's where the restraint idea comes from. How many of you have ever gotten into it with someone on social media like that and you found yourself just being like, well, and you weren't even in a conversation, they just said something and put it out there and you felt like it was inflammatory. You felt like it was frustrating. You looked at it and you were like, you're not allowed to just say that and that be okay out in the universe without anybody saying, setting that thing straight. And you looked and you're like, and you know what that needs? It needs me. It needs my voice. It needs my words. It needs my argument. It needs my assertion. And your hands were on the keyboard as fast as you could think because the words were locked and loaded right there. That moment, should you choose not to speak, it's going to require restraint. Right? That moment is a tough one. How many of you have ever had a family member that sees the world very differently than you do? And they happen to disagree with you on a lot of things. And sometimes they say something and you think, you're not allowed to say it. You can't just say that. You can't just think that. You can't just speak that, that's fine. And all of a sudden there's all this rhetoric, there's all these words, there's all this argument, there's all this assertion. It's right there on the tip of your tongue. And you're like, let's play ping pong. That moment's gonna take some restraint, isn't it? You guys, I had someone tell me here in Tucson, Arizona, that store-bought tortillas, the Mission tortilla brand, that store-bought tortillas from the grocery store are the best tortillas in the world, the Mission brand. And I looked at them and I said, you live in Tucson, Arizona, where you can buy homemade tortillas that are fresh at any point in time. Don't get me wrong, I'll eat a taco with a Mission tortilla and think it's delightful. That's just fine. But there's no universe where I'm going to tell you that is the best tortilla in the world. A fresh homemade tortilla, that's just fresh, that's the best tortilla in the world. And I looked at this person and said, no, it's not. In fact, a homemade tortilla is so much better. And they looked at me and they said, you're wrong. That's not true. And I was like, okay, noted. And I immediately drove to Anita Street Market. I love their tortillas. And I got tortillas. And when I say I bought tortillas, I bought them fresh off the comal, where they're still steaming and hot. You know where the bag is warm as you carry it out and you drive home and your whole car smells like fresh tortillas and you're reaching behind you to grab them, but you put them in the back seat because you're just me. I love these. I love them. And I bring in fresh tortillas and I'm like, okay, I got you one. And you're going to see that this is the best tortilla right here. Go ahead and eat it. And she opens it and she looks at me and rolls her eyes. And I was just like, just try it. And she tries the tortilla and she looks and she goes, it's not good. And I looked at her and I said, are you out of your mind? And she said, no. Mission tortillas at the grocery store are way, way better. And then I looked at her because I just didn't know what else to say. And I was like, when did your soul die and your life was filled with sadness? What happened to you? What occurred here that this happened to you? Right? Here's the deal. I went all the way, I drove quite a ways to go to Anita Street Market to get these. I'm on a mission where I'm going to set the record straight. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to give you this. It's going to change her. It changed nothing. And you want to know why? It's because she wasn't curious. But you want to know what else is true? Neither was I. At no point in that conversation was you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Fry's and pick up a little thing of Mission tortillas because maybe I've been missing something. Maybe I don't understand as much. I didn't ask her. What is it you really love about them that I should notice? I didn't explore, and I was not curious at all. I was like, you are wrong. Neither one of us were open to change anything. When someone isn't curious, adding more words and arguments and demonstrations and assertions isn't going to change their mind because they're not open to having their mind changed. And you are not the Holy Spirit in someone else's life. You do not possess that remarkable ability that so many of us probably wish we did. So when you get on social media and somebody makes that statement and your hands suddenly hover over a keyboard or over your text thread, or even you're having that conversation at a 4th of July barbecue or with friends or with family or where your workplace, wherever this is, and you go, you can't say that, they shouldn't do this, and I'm going to jump in. I just want to give you this one challenge. I want you to pause before you type. I want you to pause before you speak. Before you take that next move, I just want you to ask one very small question. Are they curious? That's all I want you to ask. Is this person curious right now? I want you to think about their words. I want you to think about their demeanor. I want you to think about their candor. I want you to think about their intent. I want you to think about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. And I want you to ask that question. Just pause and ask that question. Is this person curious right now? Because if they're not, if they don't demonstrate that they're actually curious to hear other things or curious to have other thoughts or to engage these things, if not, let's quote the proverb, whoever restrains his lips is prudent. When your family member says that thing and you're like, you're not allowed, I just ask, are they curious? Are they actually open to having a conversation? And are they open to thinking about this from different sides? Are they open to these pieces? If they're not, don't seek to change someone's mind who isn't open to having it changed. It's not going to go. How did those conversations go for you guys? Not well. In hindsight, we're always like, why did I do that? And usually there's like a spouse or somebody else who's like, why did you make everything not fun, right? Like it's that moment. It gets hard. When you have that person at work, ask the question, is this person curious? If they are, have a great conversation. If not, that might be the wisest thing to restrain yourself, to hold that piece back. Because all you're doing is adding more words to something where more words don't actually help. They create what? More transgression, more defense, more assertiveness, more engagement, more places that make us going, I don't like who I was when that was said and done. And you end up playing a game, ping pong, that you're like, I wish I'd never played this. Like I said, I chose this proverb because I'm not always great at that. Historically, I've not been, and I wanted to spend some time wrestling with it. But I hope that in talking through this, it's been helpful for you too. I think this is something that we wrestle with as just a culture around us, as individuals in our relationships, but also just as a culture. But can I tell you, as I started thinking through this last week, there's this one question that just kept popping into my brain over and over again that I became kind of unsettled by. And it was this: why do we do this way? Why is this so hard for us? Right? Like I found myself thinking, why is it so, and me in particular, why is this so hard for me sometimes to have the wisdom to know when not to speak? Why am I so tempted always to just keep adding more and more words to absolutely everything? Why is that the way that this is? Why is it so hard for not just me, but then I look around at the culture and I'm like, why is this hard for us? And as I was studying, I finally looked up this last word in the verse, and it's the word prudent. Whoever restrains his lips is prudent. When we read through the book of Proverbs, the word prudence is in there a lot, being prudent. And we just look and we're like, it's a book about wisdom. So you know what being prudent means? It means being wise. And then we just think of being wise as like knowing the right thing to do. That's what most of us kind of think, knowing the right thing to think and do, and combining that, like that's kind of the way most people internalize wisdom. It's when you know what to do. But there's more to this understanding of the word prudent. You know, prudent in the word itself, if you look up like the etymology of it and how it gets translated, it has this idea of success in it, of what's actually successful. So it's not just wisdom for the sake of being wise, it's because there's something that's good and important that you're actually wanting success in. You care about something. There's something that ultimately matters here. And it suddenly clicked with me where I was like, part of what makes this so hard for us is that sometimes we have a different understanding of what success is. And then we get caught up in it. And here's what I mean. Most of the time when I'm stuck in this, when I'm having a hard time, do you know what success is for me? Winning. Even with my wife, guys, even with my kids, when I actually get lost in this a little bit, it's because at some point I shifted from being a husband or being a parent to being the one who wants to win the argument, to being the one who wants to win the moment, to being the one who wants to win the perspective. Think back to my illustration that I started with me and my friend playing ping pong. You know what neither one of us were caring about? Neither one of us. We were caring about each other. We didn't. I wasn't caring about his friendship or those things. At some point, I started talking, he got defensive, and then he started engaging, and then I started attacking, and all he was trying to do was fend me off so that this conversation would change and I would see that it's not a big deal. And all I was trying to do was attack him so that he would see that I was correct and go, oh, actually, you are right. And that's all we were doing. We didn't care about each other at all. At some point in time, we just started hitting the ping pong ball harder and harder and harder because I just want to win this argument. Have you ever found that? You ever been in a moment in a relationship where you're like, this isn't even a conversation. I'm trying to win this right now. Or you're with your kids and you're like, but I'm going to win this right now. That's where it is. And we get lost in this. We think that that's what success actually looks like, but it's not. You know, the honest truth is that success looks really different, right? If you're a follower of Christ, what we're told is to love others like Christ has loved us. Success looks really different in that. Success looks really different when my goal is to relate to my wife, to know her and be known by her and grow in our marriage than it does when I want to win and overcome her. Isn't that a very different version of success? Success looks very different for me as a parent when I want to subdue and get obedience and agreement out of my children than it does when I ultimately want to relate to them, be a better parent, and grow them in ways that ultimately they care about. Do you know what and that are good for them? Success looks really different. You know, the next day after that moment with my friend, we found ourselves playing ping pong again. We did. We're standing in the living room because we were bored or whatever, and we're just silently playing ping pong now because we don't want to talk to each other. For about 10, 15 minutes, I don't know how long, just back and forth, falling back and forth, and not really talking. And then after about 10 to 15 minutes, my friend just looks at me and he goes, can we talk about yesterday? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I was thinking about it. I said, you know, when I was growing up, my family, because he's kind of a bigger dude, and stocky and just, he's a bigger guy. And so he's like, my family always used to say that I was clumsy and large and that I didn't know how to control my own size type of a thing. And I was just kind of an oaf. And he goes, and when you said that to me yesterday, it hit a little close to the belt and I got embarrassed and I started trying to essentially defend myself. And I'm sorry. That caught me off guard. I wasn't somebody who wanted to play ping pong. I was like something else. Success looked really different there. I looked at him and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I didn't know any of that about you. And I said, you know, the honest truth is you started to engage me and you were defensive and I suddenly felt like you were seeing me as weak or fragile, and then that made me want to kind of tear you down or belittle you to puff myself up or just to counter that. And I said some things that I don't even think are true and I don't even believe, and I'm sorry. And he was like, yeah, sure. We talked, that's fine. And then we just started to talk and we played some ping pong and the conversation ended and he walks over to me and he punched me in the arm, not the shoulder. And he was like, just kidding. And then walked off. And we laughed about it and it was fine. To this day, he's one of my closest friends. He was best man in my wedding. He's been one of the best friends that I've ever had in my life. And I think the reason why is because I've looked back and I've started to realize that most of the time we weren't actually trying to win at a game of ping pong. Most of the time what was actually happening is we were just volleying a ball back and forth, seeking to talk and connect because the goal was to know and be known. The goal was to care about each other and try to grow as people and just live this life the way that we'd ultimately want to live it. And that was what the real goal was. And consequently, we became very close. We ended up having a really good relationship because we weren't trying to win. And I think it's because of that even though we've had our arguments and things at moments, we've remained and stayed as close and connected as we have even to this day. And I share all of that with you because I want you to recognize we're going to mess this up sometimes. But you can always recalibrate. You can always relook and go, am I trying to win? What's success really look like for me? Is this a person who's actually curious or is this a fixed conversation that is this a monologue I'm entering into with new information? Is this an escalating conversation that we're just going to add more gasoline to a fire that's already going to burn the house down? Or is this a moment to actually de-escalate, step back and focus in on what matters most and learn when not to speak? Friends, you can't win an argument and win a relationship at the same time. You just can't. They're different measures of success. They really, really are. Prudence is coming to know which of those matter most. And when we know, I think what we'll find is that it's a lot easier to discern the very difficult task of having the wisdom of knowing when to say nothing at all. Let's pray. God, we come before you today, and I just thank you for this group of people. I do, Lord. I pray that they know how loved they are. I pray that they would know grace upon grace for themselves here this morning. And God, we recognize that just as individuals, as a culture, sometimes it's hard to know when not to speak. Sometimes some of us are good at it, I guess. Some of us struggle with it. I know I do. And Lord, I just pray that you give us that wisdom, that you open our eyes to focus on what it is that we really want, that we choose those relationships over winning. I pray that you help us give the sensitivity to understand when there's a curious moment and when there's not. I pray that you give us the wherewithal to actually pause in moments that are kind of difficult when things are escalating. Lord, give us all a kind of wisdom that our relationships might deepen in your love, that we might love others just like you have loved us. Where there's healing needed, may there be healing. Where there's goodness needed, I just ask that you breathe your goodness into it. We love you, and we thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, before you go, sorry. Before you guys go, it's awesome to have you here. My name is Ryan. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm going to be right over in this area called The Next Steps, right over there. And I'd love to meet you and just shake your hand if you're new with us today. If any of you guys find yourselves going, I would really love someone to pray for me today. Maybe it's even in light of what we've talked about. I know there's wonderful people in our prayer ministry, and their heart is to do just that. They'd love to bless you in that way. That's not weird. That's not awkward. They're here for it and would love to do that. And if any of you guys would actually like to just figure out, what does it mean to take a next step around here at Casas? You don't have to do that by yourself. We can walk alongside with you, and there's wonderful people that are right over there in that next steps area that would love to do that. For all of you guys, I hope you have an amazing day. Happy holiday weekend.